Today I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about zombie armor in 7 Days to Die. Let's get to it. So here's how this video is going to go down. First, I'm going to tell you what zombies have armor. Then we're going to talk about how armor works. Then we're going to cover armor penetration and find out whether it's worth it or not. Okay, so the zombies that have armor, there's only 4 of them. There is the utility worker, which has 20 armor. The biker has 20 armor. The soldiers, which have 50 armor, and the demo, which has 60 armor. Inside the game and the XML files, it's not even referred to as armor. It's referred to as physical damage resistance. And only those 4 zombies have physical damage resistance. And you're like, but what about non-physical damage? If it's not physical damage, they don't have resistance to it. To get the damage reduction, whatever damage is being done to them needs to have the physical damage tag. Telling you what and what does not have the physical damage tag would be a whole entire video to itself, but I'm pretty sure most things do. Okay, so let's cover exactly how this armor, aka physical damage resistance, works in game. Each of those numbers I gave you, so utility worker 20, biker 20, military 50, and demo 60, is a direct percentage damage reduction. This means, for example, with the soldiers, aka military guys, whatever you want to call them, they have 50 physical damage resistance. This is a 50% reduction to all physical damage. So if you hit them for exactly 100 damage and you don't have any armor penetration at all, you are going to deal exactly 50 damage to them because they are going to reduce that 100 damage by half. Okay, so now that you have an understanding of all that, let's talk about armor penetration and how that works. It's pretty simple to understand. All armor penetration does is reduce their resistance by a percentage of whatever that armor penetration is. So for example, the armor penetration on AP rounds is -50. This means it reduces their armor by 50%. So let's use the soldiers as another example here because it's the easiest math to understand. Once again, the soldiers have 50 armor. If you use AP rounds on a soldier, you have no other armor penetration except for the armor penetration on AP rounds. They reduce their armor by 50%. So they have 50 armor, that gets reduced by half. That means they now have 25 armor. That means all damage that is done to them is going to be reduced by 25%. Now, you may think 25% damage reduction is not much. You may think, okay, well, AP rounds, we're good to go. But 25% damage reduction is a decent amount when you consider the fact that it is a direct percentage damage reduction. So the more damage you do, the more damage is going to get reduced. And I'm not sure exactly how to explain that in a way that I know that people aren't going to say something down in the comments. What I mean is, if the target has 50 armor and you do 100 damage, 50 damage isn't getting through. If you do 200 damage, 100 damage isn't getting through. So see what I'm saying? The more damage you do, the more damage isn't getting through. So let's talk about the armor penetration skill and whether it's worth it or not. First off, to get 100% armor pen, it is possible. The easiest way to do it is to max out the penetrator skill and use AP ammo. That's it. That's all you have to do. If you do that, you will have 100% armor penetration. If you don't want to max out penetrator and you want to save some points, putting 5 points into perception and going to level 3 in penetrator will get you 90% armor reduction. This means our zombie with the highest level armor at 60% will only have 6 armor, so 6% damage reduction. Now, another way that you can get 100% armor penetration is with pistols, so specifically the 9mm pistols. If you max out Pistol Pete, this allows your 9mm weapons specifically, it only works on them, nothing else, to bypass 20% armor, so they gain 20% armor penetration. If you put 2 levels into the penetrator, that gives you 30% if you are using AP rounds, and then of course you want to use AP rounds, and that puts you at a full 100%, but you have to be at point blank range to get that armor penetration. And honestly, I don't think going about it that way is really worth it. It's not often you're going to be at point blank range, and being at point blank range means the zombie can hit you, and at that point, you may as well just go melee with something that gives you crowd control to stop the zombie from hitting you in the first place, because the gun isn't really going to do that. Okay, so what about melee weapons? So as far as melee weapons go, the only weapon I found, and feel free to correct me down in the comments or add to this if I missed something, but I'm pretty sure the only one that can get any type of armor penetration is the spear. And in order for it to even be active in the first place, you need Spear Hunter Volume 6. This states that it allows you to penetrate armor and penetrate multiple targets. However, only if you use a power attack. And from what I can tell from the XML files and each spear item itself, it looks like you only get 50% armor reduction if you have this book active and you are using a steel spear. stone will give you 30, iron will give you 40, and then steel gives you 50. This means if you have the penetrator perk and you are using a steel spear and you are doing heavy attacks, you will get 100% armor reduction. So you'll do full damage to armored targets. So is going for the armor reduction worth it? I'm not really sure. I mean, it kind of is if you're fighting a lot of heavily armored targets, but how often do you find yourself fighting a ton of military guys or a ton of demos? For the utility workers and the bikers, if you just use AP ammo on them, you're reducing them by half, which means they're only going to take a 10% damage reduction, which if you're high level near the end game, that's not really going to matter too much, especially if you're doing something like landing headshots with pretty much any weapon. You're going to be doing massive amounts of damage to them, and those targets themselves don't have a ton of hit points. If you are using a sniper rifle with AP rounds, you can almost always one-shot both of those guys, even irradiateds. Now, soldiers and demos, bit of a different situation. Even on a headshot with those guys, you're probably not going to one-shot them. But then again, whites are the same way. An irradiated white has a ton of HP, and they don't have any armor, and you still can't one-shot headshot them, unless you're doing sneak damage, but that's a different situation. But let's be honest here, 50% damage reduction and a 60% damage reduction is a very significant amount. So would having 100% armor penetration mean that it is much easier to kill targets with 50 and 60% damage reduction? Yeah, definitely. But I've played this game many hours, and I've never gotten the penetrator, and I hardly ever use AP rounds. And I've never really had any problem bringing these guys down because they're so few and far between that they never really pose any real challenge. Now, this could change in the future, especially since at some point we are going to be getting raiders, and I'm assuming armor is going to work the same for them that it does for zombies, and it works the same for us as well. It's the same across the board. Damage resistance is damage resistance. Your armor works the same as zombie armor. So once we get bandits, they're probably all going to have armor, or a majority of them are going to have varying degrees of armor, and in that case, armor penetration is probably going to be much more worth it. And to be honest with you, I think armor penetration is much more worth it earlier game than it is later game. Now, I'm speaking from my experience here. Let me know down there in the comments your experience, but I find it much harder to kill some of these zombies with armor earlier game than I do later game. For example, just the bikers alone, even though bikers and the utility workers share the same amount of armor, the bikers have a lot more HP than the utility workers do, which makes them a lot harder to bring down early game with that 20% damage reduction, because you don't do nearly as much damage early game that you do mid to late game. And AP rounds are harder to get earlier game, so just speccing into the penetrator earlier game could make it much more easier to deal with these zombies, and then later game, when you need the points for something else, you could just easily spec out of it and put those points into something else and just use AP armor. So let me know what you all think about this down there in the comments. Did you already know how armor worked? Did you learn anything here? And do you think that having the armor penetration is worth it, and at what stage in the game? All right, that is going to wrap it up for this one. If you found this video helpful and informational, please consider hitting the subscribe button and notification bell so you can be notified when I upload other videos. And if you're looking for some more of my 7 Days to Die content, you can find a link to another one of my videos on the screen right now. I want to give an absolute massive shout out and thank you to all of my channel supporters for helping to keep these videos sponsor free. You all are absolutely amazing people. If you would like to become an official channel supporter, check out the links in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. If you're shy, you don't like to comment, just hit that thumbs up button and share your support. Until next time, thanks for watching.